Today we're visiting with Ann Fort. Ann has been a member at Hope United Methodist Church for 29 years, and she's agreed to tell us some of her memories of Hope Church. Ann, can you tell us when you first learned about this Christian community we call Hope?
We had just moved here from New Orleans and living in the Oakwood apartments, and Jim went around visiting churches. And it was close to Hope. It was also close to that Cherry Creek community.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved on December 19th, so we went to the community church for Christmas. And I said, that's too big for me. So he visited different churches, and he came home one day and said he liked Hope. Well, okay. So I went with him a couple times. And then he did one of his favorite road trips. And so that Sunday I decided I'd go by myself. And I liked the feel. And Dick Vickery was getting ready to leave, and the associate pastor, Jim Llewellyn, and his wife Karen were there. And Karen spoke that afternoon, or that morning, about an organization called Denver Urban Ministries, Denham. And I thought, gee, that's the kind of thing I'm interested in. And so I went up and talked to her a little bit afterwards, and she said they're going to have to find somebody to take her place. Well, Jim comes back from his trip, and I'm kind of excited, and so I tell him about this, and I said, that's what I'd like to do. He said, honey, you're brand new. They're not going to ask you to be on that committee. Well, a few days later, I got a call from Karen saying, would you be interested? And I said, yeah. So she sent me to Denham meeting, and I met Sharon McCormick, and she spent 2 hours with me talking about Denham. So then I went to their meeting, and then next month I went to another meeting. And somewhere along the way, it's all Carolyn Osner's fault. She was head of mission. She came up and said, understand that you've been going to meetings at Denham. And, yeah, well, if you do that, then you have to be on Christian mission and outreach. So there I am.
So you're blaming Carolyn for this?
Yeah, it's all her fault. So through working with her, I'm trying to think just a minute. We started the food drives with Denham, and they're still going on. I don't know if we still have food drives, but Denham is no longer in existence.
It evolved into different organizations, yes.
Yeah. And then being downtown, and with that, somehow I met, all of this is a God thing, Charlie, but I met a lady with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and so she said, you know, we feed the homeless. And I said, well, that's great. Once a week, where? And it was at the Baptist Church across from the Capitol and on Grant Street. So it turned out to be the Grant Avenue Street Reach. So I just was having a great time going down there and helping cook, and I told the Christiansons about them. Well, we want to do that. David wasn't working at the time.
You're talking about Dave and Judy Christensen?
Christensen,
yes.
Yeah. So then pretty soon David got Bob Grafton to come, and then it was Nancy and
Duncan and Bruce
Duncan.
Yes.
And then it was Don Durst. But we moved from the Baptist Church. I'm a little hazy thing. We went to Grant Avenue United Methodist Church, used their kitchens. Then we went to a little church on University, and we can't recall that one, and then ended up where they are now, still on Grant Avenue.
Yep.
But I would go, and one day Leah Brooks was one of the youth, and she was on Christian Mission Outreach representing the youth. And it was Christmas time. She said, well, she had heard about a great idea of stuffing socks to give to the homeless. And so the committee said they thought that'd be a great idea, and you stuffed it with toiletries. So she had some of the youth members bring a pair of their dad's socks, all sorts of conditions, all sizes, and all. So we filled them and gave them to the people. Well, the next year came, and I thought, well, maybe we can add a little bit to that. So that's where, and now is through the years, now the UMW fills the Christmas socks, and they fill about 400, 450 every year. And they go down to the meal site and pass them out. Along the way of all of that, when we were doing the meals on this little church on University, Dave Christensen would go and cook. Well, he was getting ready to leave. I think he had taken the Tom Warner job. I'm not sure about that. But he wanted to do a real good meal for him. And so he said he'd do, what about a burrito dinner for him? So he fixed the burrito dinner, and normally they weren't allowed to carry food out, but he made enough they could take it home. And Trudy Garrett was there, and she said, well, why don't we have a burrito dinner at Hope Church? So that's how that was born.
And that went for several years.
Oh, several years. Yeah. We also did Italian dinner, and we used to do the pancake breakfast, but it was always Bob David, Bob Grafton, Don Durst, Bruce Duncan, and Barb Fath, I think, were the pancake flippers.
Yes.
You know? So that's how those things developed.
Well, Ann, tell me how you got interested in this mission and outreach. Had you done things like that in New Orleans?
And a little bit. I had a business down there, decorating business, so I did a little bit. I remember one morning getting out of bed, and as I stepped out, I said, okay, God, use me. Don't do that. So later that day, I got a phone call from a person that worked at the Y, and she said, we have a problem. We provide Thanksgiving and Christmas meals for people on Meals on Wheels to let the regular drivers have the holiday off.
Yes.
And we'll help you. I said, well, okay. Well, the first year we prepared 600 meals. The next year it was 800. Oh. And the following year it was 1,200, and I said, that's enough.
My goodness.
So doing that, and I was always interested in the homeless, and I think I'm trying to think who, Salvation Army provided the blankets, and we would be able to shelter people in cold weather, which doesn't happen often. Yes. In New Orleans, but when it does, yeah. So I think if it all started anywhere, it was when I grew up as a child. As a child, it was the Depression, and Mother said, well, let's go help this person. They don't have as much as we do. And I think the seed was planted.
Well, you have a great tradition of reaching out for the underprivileged and the homeless and the hungry.
Well, that's just what you're supposed to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good for you. Yeah. Well, another interesting part of your history at Hope Church is when you and your husband Jim agreed to be sort of pseudo-grandparents for the Garrett kids. Tell us how that came about.
Well, Trudy and I were in the kitchen or somewhere, like on a Tuesday, and we had spent time with the families, two families getting together. And she said, oh, Scooter came home so sad from school yesterday. All his friends had talked about going in to their grandparents for the weekend, and he doesn't have grandparents. And I said, Jim will be his grandpa, you know. And
had you talked to Jim about it?
No, I just told him. So I went home and I said, you've got a grandson, you know. So the next Sunday, Jim went over to him and said, Scooter, I hear you need a grandpa. And he said, well, yeah. He said, can I be your grandpa? Let's shake. So Jim loved the zoo. I don't know if you knew that. And so they went to the zoo. Jim went to his wrestling matches. They went here, they went to the zoo. They did this other, they went to the zoo. Well, since he was grandpa, I got to be grandma.
Of course.
So it's been wonderful.
Well, I remember Jim as quite a storyteller. He was a very gregarious and friendly person, and I think he'd be a great grandpa.
Well, you know, I really ought to give Jim a lot of credit for me being a Methodist. He was a Methodist, I was Episcopalian, and he said, honey, forts have been Methodist for over 250 years. Well, I didn't go back and check.
Well,
and he said, you don't want to break that.
He was known to exaggerate at times.
Just a little bit, yeah. But I think his legacy was one of hospitality and friends and caring, and I will bring in the humor. Yeah. And I often thought that he felt if he could make a person laugh, then they would feel better.
Yeah.
So he did leave a legacy.
I believe he also recruited Dave Christensen to go on a mission outreach or a seminar down in Louisiana.
It was the Catholic retreat in outside of New Orleans. So he went, and Bob Grafton went, Bruce Duncan went one time. But another story about Jim, I have to talk about. We went to, this is early on with our, when we had been there a year or a little bit more, we went to one of the, council meetings?
Yes,
yeah.
The church council.
And so they were talking about getting more people in and speaking to people and talking more. And I leaned over to him and I said, what they need is a Mr. Prim. Mr. Prim was the greeter at Algiers United Methodist Church where we went. And he was there faithfully every Sunday. And we joked and said he took 5 minutes to greet every lady, but greeted all the men in 5 minutes. So Jim, the next Sunday, appointed himself the greeter, and he greeted up until he got too sick with cancer. And then David started helping him. And then David and Bob took over being greeters. So that's where that started.
Well, and I've heard Dave Christensen say that what a Christian man Jim was, and that he was really instrumental in David's decision to work in the church and now serves the church up in the north part of the metro area.
Yeah. Jim did a lot of good, but he didn't get involved. You know, his hobby was resting. And he devoted a lot of time. But he encouraged me to go and do.
Well, and you're known in the Rocky Mountain Conference as sort of the mother of the Chuka Church in Kenya.
Oh.
Tell us how you got involved with that outfit.
Well, I guess I had been going a few times, and I had a contact. Excuse me, I had a contact who told me one day about this church, needed a sister church. So I talked to the pastor, and we decided we would do it. So in 2002, there were 12 of us from Hope Church that went and laid the cornerstone. And I have to tell you, Charlie, there were 3 of us that did it. Valerie Most, four of us, Dosha, Linda Brooks, Linda Coughlin at the time, and myself. And I just thought it was great. Valerie and I were down in the trench. I think Dosha mixed the concrete.
Yes.
And gave it to Linda, and Linda put it down. I have a picture of Valerie and me holding the stone, and I didn't realize until after I got home, and I still think every now and then, I had the privilege of laying a stone.
That's a significant event.
Yeah. And in 2014, 12 of us returned to Chuka Church to celebrate the completion. And we're still in touch with them.
Well, and you went several times. How many times did you go to Kenya?
I went 16 times as a Methodist and twice as a Rotarian. And we had put in a surge system at a school, and came home and told the story at church. And Frank Sargent came up and he said, "Do they need anything else? That's the kind of thing Rotary's interested in."
Yes.
And I said, "Well, we're concerned about the children in water." And he said, "Well, here's God again. I just happen to have somebody going to Kenya, another Rotarian. Is there any way he can call?" And I said, I put him in touch with Bishop E. Matthew. They walked the site. Don Howard came home, wrote a proposal, and Inglewood Rotary Club sponsored clean water system for 2,000 people.
Wow.
Which is still going on. So that's something else Hope Church did.
Well, you mentioned Dosha and Valerie. Those are both young women who grew up at Hope Church.
Yeah.
And you recruited them to go to Kenya?
Yeah. And and then also Valerie Most.
Yes.
But Valerie and Annie Regal were some of those kids in middle school that I started doing mission work with.
Yes.
And both of them been to Kenya with me a number of times. I've been in both their weddings. Just beautiful friendships.
Yes. And now Dosha, who is your grandchild by proxy, now has her children. Do you get to be a great-grandma for those?
Yeah. And I have 15 other great-grandchildren.
That's a wonderful blessing.
Yeah. So, pretty special.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, you've been recognized for your efforts in Kenya by the conference. I believe they gave you an award for your outstanding volunteer service.
I got, I don't think the conference gave me, I got, well, maybe so, Bishop Brown, I got the Hero Award. But what was special about that, I think that was in 2006, Hope Church got the award for the best mission church. And also Dave Christensen got the Quiet Disciples.
Yes, yes.
So that's what Hope Church did in 2006.
Well, and all of those activities at Hope Church were directly tied to you and your efforts.
Well, I was just lucky. Charlie, Kenya was never on my bucket list to go visit.
Yes.
You know, I like the snows of Kilimanjaro and out of Africa and those things. But so, anyway, I still am in touch. I also have a child named for me in Meerut, Kenya. Yeah, Raymond Fort Mugambi.
All right.
One of our drivers started a business, and it was Fort-friendly safaris and vacation.
Great.
Well,
you've touched many lives in the Kenyan mission, but you also mentioned going on mission trips with the youth, both the middle school and the high school groups.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of those.
Well, it was Leela Brooks. She said something to me one day, why don't you go with us on the mission trip? And I'm thinking, and what would I do with all these kids, you know? Well, as you know, I turned out to be the van driver and the cook.
Yes.
And so it was great, great. And then that trip you were on, that some of those kids were seniors.
Yes.
And so I decided I wouldn't go anymore. And then at the end of the next year, Scooter said something to Linda Brooks. It was so much fun. Wish we could do it again. And she got the idea, why not go on a postgraduate trip? So that's when I learned how teenagers mature in the summer after high school. And we went to Branson, Missouri, and worked with Habitat for Humanity, and we went to Branson, that was Branson, and we went to Baldwin, Louisiana for Encore. And of course I was thrilled that they wanted to go down south.
Yes.
And showed them how to eat crawfish. You sit down at the table in this country restaurant just pulled off the side of the road, and they just put newspapers on the table, and then they pour, I'm going to say hundreds, pounds and pounds of boiled crawfish. And then you have a little wine or you have a little beer, and you sit there. And some of the kids took a little bit for them to figure out how to peel the crawfish. I think I need some crawfish right now.
You've made us all hungry talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. So that was fun. That was
Well,
great.
I remember the trip to Fort Apache,
Oh, yeah.
where it was just hotter than blazes.
Yeah.
But your stamina and physical strength impressed me because you worked as hard as anybody.
Oh, did I?
I think you did.
I have to keep busy. I can't stop. I don't know what's going to happen. I stop and all.
And I remember when we went to the canyon, one of the girls was having a difficult personal time, and we were concerned about her maybe doing something
Yeah,
that might
we were.
threaten her physical
Yeah.
safety. But you were quite a mentor, I believe, on that trip, and it was
Well,
a godsend.
and so was Linda, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a tough trip for me. Some other things took place, and I just, it was hard for me.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why I took a year off and let them grow up.
That's,
You know,
that's
so-
terrific. Well, you mentioned that Dr. Vickery was the pastor when you came to Hope, but he was about to leave.
He was. He'd
Yeah.
already been given notice.
And following him, Sam Day came to be the pastor. Do you remember Sam Day?
Yeah, Sam called me the Energizer one. He had a way of getting you to do something he wanted done, but you thought it was your idea.
Yes.
He was great.
He was a great man.
Yeah.
And after Sam Day, Margaret Hankins, who had been the district superintendent, was
Yeah.
appointed to Hope Church.
Yeah.
And she was a bit of a pioneer, one of the first women to serve as a senior pastor in a major church. How did you feel about that?
Well, I'm comfortable. I was fine. I have to tell you something about Margaret, how something else developed. Some of us, this is before we changed the church, you know, and added on the kitchen and all this.
Yes.
So there are about 5 or 6 of us sitting around talking. And she said, I learned something that I'm disturbed about, that when they drop ex-offenders off, when they are released, they are dropped off at the end of Smith Street. They've all been given a check and dropped off across the street from a bar. They're set up to fail. And so we talked about it a little bit, and that really bothered me. So I went back and talked to her one day, and I said, Margaret, that bothers me. You know, what can be done, you know? She said, well, let me give you somebody to talk to. So she gave me somebody in the conference. So I talked to the lady, and she said, oh, I happen to be going to a meeting next week. Would you like to go with me? And so I went, and here was a room full, well, 30, 35 people, some ex-offenders, people representing different programs and all. The chairman was an ex-offender, and I'm just, wow. 2 women came in, big ladies, big women, tattoos, all of this. They, motorcycle riders. They had a mission of helping ex-offenders. And so when it came around to my turn to say why we're there, I talked about what can be done about meeting these people and mentioned the backpack. And so I got encouragement, and I went back and talked to Margaret. And so I was given a contact of somebody, and that person, I wish I could remember her name, was down near the, is it Florence, where the prisons are?
Yes, Canyon City in Florence.
Canyon City, yeah. That was there and worked with people that were being released. They had to go through this program and all. So she would let us know when ex-offender was coming to church and or to Denver. We also made the contact with Denham, and we would fill the backpacks and take them to Denham because they were told to go to Denham. Ex-offenders were told to go to Denham. So that's how that program started.
And what did you put in the backpacks?
Toiletries, a towel, a washcloth, shaving equipment, and we ended up doing women's too. And John and I met a couple of people being released. And I can remember we would take them out to somewhere near Smith Road where there were hotels they could stay, and Hope Church, this is part of the mission, finances,
Yes.
would house them a couple nights. And I can remember one night we picked up 2 fellows, and as we were driving on, I'm trying to think, the streets, one of the boys said, "Oh, that's where my grandpa used to live." And then we went somewhere else, and there used to be a certain store there. We did stop at, I don't know if it was McDonald's or something. They wanted French fries. "Don't you want a hamburger?" "No, we want double French fries." So those were, John was great. He helped a young man the best he could. It's so hard to keep it going. You help and you pray more than you help.
Yes.
That it takes
And who is that John you're talking about?
John Clark.
John Clark,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. We were co-chairs for probably 10 years for Christian. He's a dear friend of mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's still active with the Mission Outreach.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he does his thing. Yeah. So that's the backpack ministry, and Elizabeth Church picked it up for a while. I spoke at the first Universalist Church one Sunday about the backpacks, and there had been some young men that had just been released. Well, they picked up that program, the backpack, and did it for about 3 years. So you never done.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Margaret Hankins also served as a co-pastor with John Lee. Do you remember John Lee?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loved John. He would give he would have extra programs or opportunities to study. So he had one on dreams.
Yes.
And I had to go because I had these repetitive dreams.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And one was of my father, and one was, I was young adult. I hadn't married yet. And I had worked in Seattle during the war with Boeing. And I often was in Seattle, and it's built on hills. So I would go in this floor, and I really did, but I'd dream it. And you'd take the elevator up rather than walking up the hill. But I would always be trying to catch the plane. And I'd always see this family from New Orleans. Here's the present and the past getting together. And so I told him all about the dreams. And there are just about 5 of us in there. And I said, why? And he said, Ann, I have no idea. And do you know I never dreamed again?
That's right, it stopped?
They stopped.
Wow.
So that's John Lee.
And Steve Miller came to Hope Church after that, and his wife Lissa. You remember them?
I do, yeah. They were very interested in Lissa taking mission trips to the Mexican areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, she spoke Spanish very well.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, so that was good.
Yeah.
So other people reached out. Yeah.
And Marilyn Lesser, I believe, was also a contact of yours at Hope Church for many years.
I learned a lesson from Marilyn, and I've thought about so many times. I admire her in her last days. Losing an eye, all of those, she still had Bible study at the retirement home where a rehab center. Yeah, but we were working one day. She was kind of my mentor. She kind of corrected me and suggested maybe I should do this, you know. But I said something one day about these people. She said, don't use the word these. It's a derogatory word. And when you stop and think about it, you know, these people, they're separate and apart, they're different.
Yes.
So I don't use these. I say these dishes.
Yes, but not people.
Not people, yeah.
And you remember Marla Cowers, who was the associate pastor?
I do. I was still with missions. She was very supportive with it, yeah.
And our current associate pastor, Stephanie Price, remember?
Oh, wow. Yeah, loved that girl.
And I believe you knew her before she came to Hope, isn't that right?
Yeah, I did. I met her one time when a friend was here from Kenya, and I was working with Don Messer, and we visited Evergreen. And Fiona was little. She maybe 2, and she did somersaults on the, not the altar, but up, you know, where the preacher stands.
Yes.
What's the word? Yeah, she would do that. She did somersaults. She'd catch the railing and swing on it, you know. Yeah. But I just admire Stephanie and so support her on this new program. Yeah. She has so many gifts.
I agree.
So does John.
I agree.
Yeah. And I just love to follow Fiona. Yeah.
Do you remember Steve Warren, who served part of the time with Stephanie?
Steve Warren went to Kenya with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Steve and Beth. Yeah, he was a great encourager all the time. Yeah.
And I believe Don Bird went, but I'm not sure
Don
you went on that
twice.
trip.
He went with me.
Yeah.
I was on the team a couple years ago. I think it was 2014 when we did the celebration of Chuka Church. He went then, and then he took his own team last year. Yeah. So I get a lot of support. I just brought up Chuka Church to him recently. We still have a little money in the Kenya account, and I said I'd like to send them 2,000. You know, the thing about Chuka Church is they always accounted for the money we gave them, and we could go back the next year and see the progress. I have wonderful pictures. They built they call it their cathedral,
Yes.
around a little wooden church, and it was painted blue, and the walls went up around, and I said, how are you going to get it out? You know, how are you going to? They said, we built it in fourths. to begin with. So before the wall got too high, they went in with the lift, took it down the end of the path down here, and set it up. And so what's interesting, and this is so typical, they built a wonderful kitchen, modern. They still get cooking with the big pots over the flame on it, no gas stoves.
I mean, well, it's impressive because sometimes you give to a certain cause and you're not sure your money ever does anything.
You're right.
For them to
or it's used
account
somewhere
for.
else.
Yes.
I had to learn that the hard way. And I also took a few trips. I want the receipts. Excuse me.
Yes.
So I got the receipts.
Good for you. Well, and you've been a member at Hope Church and a very active one in the missions, the outreach, and the things we've discussed for the past 29 years. Do you have special memories of what that church means to you?
Yeah. The altitude is getting to me here. And last year I visited one of my grandkids in the state of Washington. And I have trouble with hills going up. And so I was with the grandchildren, and Grammy, let's show you the park. So we went down here to the park, and they're on their bicycles, and I'm just going down. Oh, let's show you our secret place, and this is something else. We better go home. We'll go down to the corner and go up. And I got to the corner, and I looked up. I thought, I'm not going to make it to the top. Walked up. I have thought, I'm going back to look, but I don't think I could be my friends here. Excuse me. It's either feeling better or having my friends.
Yeah.
So it's the church has been a friend. Yeah. You shouldn't ask me stuff like that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can cut out.
You've seen Hope accomplish many things in the 29 years you've been a member there. What would you like to see it accomplish in the future?
Well, Charlie, I really don't know. Just keeping the outreach going. That's what we're all called to do, put here to serve others. And I think we've done that. And there are so many different ways. I mean, they're doing the sandwiches. As long as you can get people involved, like they get a bunch of people in to make the sandwiches.
Yes.
The meal sites, Chris, think of her last name, Chamberlain, still goes to Grant Avenue Outreach.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And you helped plant some of those seeds.
Well, it just, people wanted to help, we needed their help.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Ann, we've talked about some special people in your life at Hope and some of the things that you've accomplished. Are there any special memories that we haven't talked about?
well, let's see. One that meant a lot and still means a lot, it was, Jim was still here, and it was Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, was on a Sunday. The church was packed. Dave Christensen was there, and I saw him carrying a picture around, and greeted him, this as we were getting ready to go into church, and go in, and up on the platform, what do we call it, where we go to church when we walk up? Anyway, was this picture of Mother Teresa. And so I knew he had some pictures, and I thought, isn't that great? He's going to give it to Hope Church. And so came time, a lot had gone on, and then he starts talking about Mother Teresa, and then he started talking about me. And then he finished, and I'm sitting back there. I never looked so awful. I had on this green suit. My hair didn't look right. And I stood up, and I just saw it going down, and I saw Pat Brooks. She's crying. People were crying. And they gave me that book, or the picture of Mother Teresa, and it's engraved. And for Hope Church's Mother Teresa. That's pretty. That made me start behaving myself.
I think you've always behaved yourself, Ed.
But anyway, that was pretty special. Yeah.
Well, you've been a vital part of the missions at Hope Church and as part of that congregation, and I want to thank you for being here and giving this interview for
Thank you.
all of us. Anything else you can remember that you would like to say?
No, I can look at my notes just a second. I think you just about covered it.
Well, Ann, I want to thank you for sitting for this interview. It's a real treasure to be with you, and
Thank you.
we all appreciate you at Hope Church. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.